L'indisponibilité de Bruno, qui nous a fait l'honneur et la confiance de pouvoir organiser cette masterclass autour de son travail avec Peter Doyle, nous a fait nous poser évidemment des questions déontologiques. Nous qui tenons à affirmer que les directeurs de la photographie doivent être en charge de l'équipe image en préparation, en tournage et en post-production. Mais la collaboration exemplaire de Bruno Delbonnel et Peter Doyle nous a semblé au contraire passionnante pour comprendre l'étendue des questions à résoudre par un directeur de la photographie aujourd'hui. Et nous ne remercierons jamais assez Bruno Delbonnel de nous autoriser à entrer de plein pied dans cet atelier si fructueux qu'il partage avec Peter Doyle.
Nous avons planifié, préparé cette masterclass avec 2 masters. On a un master ce soir. On est de plein cœur avec Bruno pendant ses problèmes familiaux, ces urgences familiales qui l'empêchent de venir. Mais nous sommes très heureux d'être avec Peter. Curieusement, il aime beaucoup travailler avec les directeurs photo français. Donc, parmi les directeurs de photo avec lesquels il a travaillé, il y a Thierry Arbogast, Dion Bibi, Bruno Delbonnel, évidemment, Benoît Delhomme, Andrew Lesney, Philippe Rousselot, Eduardo Serra et Michael Saracen. Et Peter vient récemment de remasteriser tous les films Harry Potter pour le HDR. Et apparemment, ça a demandé pas mal de psychanalyse, m'a dit Peter, après ce travail-là. Et il vient aussi de remasteriser les Batman. Je vous présente donc vraiment un coloriste exceptionnel, un artiste, Peter Doyle. Alors, Peter, il paraît que tu as commencé dans des bars punk en Australie à faire de la musique.
Yeah, really late 80s. I was really just a musician and mixing. So at that stage, there was many bands, and part of that crowd, we really focused on the kind of the punk and new jazz funk punk, with people such as Nick Cave and Ed Cooper, and it ended up being some of the first punk bands in Australia. And part of that was that then I moved to the UK, and given that I was not actually very good at, in fact, being a trumpet player with punk music, I moved to Salzburg in Austria and really focused on mixing classical music. And then in Salzburg, I started a production company with a partner where we really delivered a lot of classical music CDs. My partner would produce and I would engineer. But part of that process was to always focus on the energy of the performance. Whether it was punk or classical music was kind of irrelevant. It was the idea of performance and using technology to reproduce or to share that performance. And then as part of that release of classical music, that was just when there was a lot of consolidation within the industry, and classical music industry itself felt the need to start creating music videos. Given that the technology is kind of the same, there's just more frequencies between sound and image, some would disagree. I found myself gravitating more to the picture side. I became part of a research project by Kodak in Rochester, which was the Cineon. And that was before the word digital intermediate had ever actually been created. As part of that development with Cineon, it was at the time when Peter Jackson was trying to work out how to actually make Lord of the Rings. And part of the introduction was to work out how to make New Zealand look English.
Et tu as rencontré donc Bruno Delbonnel il y a à peu près 10 ans, n'est-ce pas, sur le tournage d'un petit film qui s'appelait Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince.
Yeah, the English short film known as the Harry Potter franchise. We had set up a production unit. As part of the production, we had set up a color grading department. It was not external. The production felt it was important that the rushes really reflected the kind of the end result.
Alors moi, je vais faire un petit flashback, Benjamin. De ce que je comprends, Peter, vous êtes ingénieur de formation.
Yes, yeah. my training as such was a engineer as such, really focusing on more the physics side of engineering, because that can be a big thing. So I tend to see myself as a translator. So I'll work with a DP or director, take on board what the visual desires are, and then work out technically what that can be.
Je voulais arriver donc à ton approche au DI que tu voulais présenter. Et tu disais pour toi, il y avait 3 axes importants. Il y avait d'une part la reproduction des images du tournage, c'est-à-dire cette notion de reproduire finalement exactement ce qui a été créé sur le tournage. Et puis il y avait une seconde notion encore plus importante, c'est de passer de cette reproduction à une représentation, c'est-à-dire d'interpréter, de traduire comme un traducteur cette fidélité pour créer une histoire narrative. Et l'axe, le point entre ce qui relie ces deux choses, reproduction et représentation, c'est ce que tu appelles the grade, l'étalonnage.
Just let my brain process for a second. As with any translation, there is a need for a philosophy because you really are needing an innate understanding of what is being spoken or performed or filmed. And to translate that, you then need to understand what tools or language to use to then deliver that. Politically, for me, it is important to have utmost respect for the performance and to create a medium where that performance and mood is reproduced. And it's fascinating to then, following that concept, to look at the works of like Walter Benjamin with his Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction and very early photography where there was the dichotomy of is it art or is it something mechanical. All of those kind of debates are very interesting. So for me, I look at what technology is available to be able to reproduce this visual image in a way. So working with Bruno, it's always a question of using light and imagery to seduce or confront in a film. And to achieve that kind of nuance with light, one really needs an extremely controlled and defined delivery medium, which we would call the feature films. And then, so if we take that concept, there's really 2 parts to it. One is just as with any artistic pursuit, there are the considerations that go with that, such as painting or photography, but the technology side is important and needed. So in terms of the working with Bruno, we have a very tight collaboration where it's very clear Bruno's in charge of the light and driving the actual image with his crew, and then I'm in charge of the technology and how to reproduce that light onto a screen. And it's at that point where my translating skills come in that it's also a question of manipulating, because to reproduce an image on a screen means that you have to make decisions on how it is reproduced. That's what we would call the color grade.
Oui, mais vos discussions vos discussions, et d'ailleurs, je pense que la musique, qui est un monde que vous aimez tous les deux, n'y est pas pour rien, précède largement le tournage. Donc, quand vous recevez un scénario, comment en parlez-vous avec Bruno?
Well, we'll break the script down. We'll both read. Bruno obviously will have a lot of discussions with production designer, director, and we'll try to break it down into moods. And the first would be defining the kind of mood for the different scenes. And then Bruno will work out an approach to the lighting. But what really precedes that is more the philosophy of what kind of mood to create and how to create that move or that mood. And in many cases, it may be quite counterintuitive.
Oui, quand on a discuté avec Bruno, quand on préparait cette masterclass, Bruno nous avait parlé de cette anecdote avec le peintre Bacon. Et Bacon qui n'avait plus de place, qui n'avait plus de tissu pour peindre et qui a retourné sa toile et qui s'est mis à peindre de l'autre côté et qui avait découvert une texture qui lui a donné envie de continuer dans ce sens-là. Est-ce que vous en avez parlé? Est-ce que tu peux nous dire un petit peu ton sentiment là-dessus?
Correct. Certainly what I try to do is to separate out the technology bounds so that then we can create, I guess what I'm trying to say is what I try to do is to break out the pipeline so that visually we can do whatever we want, but in a way that is technically deliverable, as we say. So basically a wild and crazy grade, but that it can be reproduced in the correct way around the world. So what that is about is really taking control of what we call the distribution chain and having a very clear understanding of what the theatrical distribution chain is capable of, and then working within that, and then building the tools that can produce technically a correct system. I mean, an anecdote is if we take Llewellyn Davis, we took a very hard, long look at where would this film be distributed. And it was clear that an American independent film that starts and finishes with the same shot about a cat is not going to be released in the very large multiplex screens. We're not talking, so Llewellyn Davis clearly was not a summer tentpole film. In simple terms, that meant that the film clearly was not going to be shown on extremely large screens as its main release. It was going to be released more in the art house cinemas. As we know, the size of an image dictates its contrast. The larger the image, the less the contrast with the flare. For Llewellyn Davis, we wanted it sad, depressing, and low contrast. And it needed to feel as if it's winter. It was shot in, ironically, one of the warmest winters in New York. Mm-hmm. So we, as part of our grade, we built a lot of sharpening and blurs and but basically manipulated the image. But we ensured that we manipulated the image and built that on a screen that we felt would be about the same size that it would typically be released in. And that is like a technique that I noticed happens in the print industry. If you are printing something for an A4, you sharpen it for an A4. If you are printing something for a billboard, you sharpen it for a billboard. So
okay.
Yeah.
Tu nous as montré certains de tes outils. Et avec l'exemple de Buster Scruggs, je vais me tourner vers la salle. Y a-t-il des personnes ici qui ont vu le dernier film sur Netflix des Coen, Buster Scruggs? Ah oui, quand même. Ah oui, d'accord. Donc, ça représente quelque chose.
So people do have Netflix subscriptions.
or Netflix passwords.
Benjamin, juste pour compléter ta question, il y en a combien qui l'ont vu sur grand écran? Voilà.
C'est marrant d'enchaîner
Oui,
bah oui,
la
c'est vrai.
question du contraste et de
Bravo,
la taille.
bravo pour les grands écrans.
C'est important de le préciser
Oui.
parce qu'ils ont la possibilité aux États-Unis de voir sur grand écran, mais puisqu'on parle de taille d'écran.
Oui,
Là,
mais
en
ça
l'occurrence,
c'est un...
ouais, mais c'est intéressant qu'il vient
Oui.
de parler, de travailler par rapport à la taille d'écran. Moi, je suis un peu surpris parce que nous, parfois, des tout petits films se retrouvent sur les écrans les plus grands, à Cannes notamment. Enfin, tu vois, donc et là, en l'occurrence, il travaille pour Netflix. Sur quelle taille d'écran il travaille? C'est intéressant pour nous de le savoir.
We actually do different, the technical answer is we do a trim pass where I will adjust or make adjustments depending on its release medium. So Buster Scruggs, in fact, I had just finished a film print version of Buster Scruggs last week, which was extraordinary to see film print again. But to answer your question, Buster Scruggs exists as 35mm print, as UHD 4000 nit HDR, and then in the industry language, a CMU pass for the 1000 nit and 100 nit. So basically the downstream versions for Netflix, and then as a 4K DCI. So to circle back to your question, when you go to the different formats, it is not just the color that's different. It is the contrast range and flare. And as part of my process, I will do my best to emulate that process. So in terms of the collaboration with Bruno and in this film, the Coen brothers, there was the agreement that the DCI version was the golden version. I'm scared to use that word because it means a grade, but the DCI version was the version that was considered the way the film should exist.
Mm.
And as part of that process, with Bruno and the team, we will have dedicated sharpening and basically make it look the way we want. And then based on my relationship with the team, I promise that I will do my best endeavor to reproduce that grade on the other formats. Different filmmakers will have different levels of involvement. Joel and Ethan's involvement in the other versions was zero.
Et donc, Faust a été réalisé par Alexandre Sokourov. Et au moment de faire l'étalonnage, il avait besoin de communiquer à Bruno et à Peter ses intentions pour cet étalonnage. Et il vous a montré ses aquarelles, que voici, pour communiquer un peu avec vous sur l'étalonnage qu'il souhaitait.
Pour préciser les choses, Benjamin,
Je t'en prie.
Sokourov a attendu plusieurs mois l'étalonnage du film. Et pendant qu'il attendait, il a travaillé à ses aquarelles. C'est-à-dire qu'il a gardé, entre le tournage et l'étalonnage, il a gardé le film dans la tête et qu'il n'a pas pu s'empêcher, sans doute, de continuer à travailler sur le film. Et c'est là qu'il a mis au point cette modification de lumière dans les plans. Donc, excuse-moi, mais quand tu as dit au moment de l'étalonnage, je pense qu'il y a des mois de réflexion d'un metteur en scène sur son propre film, rêvant un étalonnage. Et je pense que c'est ça qui fait que Faust est, tu as employé le mot, et on pourrait l'employer, le chef-d'œuvre que c'est.
Oui, absolument, c'est un chef-d'œuvre. Et ce qui est important, je crois, à noter, c'est que ces indications, d'après ce que j'ai compris, ne sont pas des indications de palette ou de couleur, mais de l'émotion, de l'intention qu'il voulait transmettre sur la scène.
Oui, de changement de couleur, en fait, aussi. Bon, moi, je parle pas.
Je dirais juste un truc avant de laisser la parole à Peter. Je rappelle quand même, parce qu'on n'a pas dit, que Bruno Delbonnel travaille avec un assemblage numérique et que ça sert régulièrement d'outil pour transmettre ces informations à Peter. Je pense que c'est bien de le rappeler. Je rappelle aussi que Sokourov, quand il a parlé de Peter Van Ter, si je me trompe, mais en tout cas Bruno nous a dit que quand il parlait de ce film-là en particulier, il voulait un monde malsain, en décomposition. C'est certainement pour ça qu'ils ont travaillé avec des superpositions de vert et de magenta. Et je crois tout à l'heure, Peter nous a dit quand on préparait ensemble cette masterclass, il nous a cité cette formule. Soukoroff lui aurait dit « Je veux que les couleurs sentent la mort ».
Oui.
Yeah, working with Alexander and Bruno is great fun. A couple of anecdotes is that our translator at some point had to stop because she said that Alexander is not actually speaking anymore. He's in fact giving poetry. And the fact that he's using watercolors on very textured paper was enough of a clue that Alexander was thinking of very soft images and quite pastel. Somebody like Tim Burton will present, in fact, very concise drawings and conceptual drawings, which you know would imply a much sharper image and a much deeper contrast.
Et une des notions qui revenait vis-à-vis de cet étalonnage, on peut mettre le son un tout petit peu haut, Stéphane, un peu plus haut si tu veux, c'était cette notion de créer un étalonnage interactif qui changeait avec la lumière.
Yeah, a few things about this scene is once we enter the bathhouse, there's a natural transition to a much lower contrast, and that was built into the original photography with all the steam from the water.
Première chose, oui, par rapport à cette maison de bain, en fait, hein, où on avait des contrastes.
Je crois qu'on peut baisser un peu le son, Stéphane.
On avait des contrastes qui étaient plus faibles, et qu'on a baissé les contrastes, mais ça faisait écho à la vapeur, à la fumée qu'il y avait justement dans cette maison de bain.
And that allowed me to really kind of lock onto the steam and use that as a wash to give the aquarelle colors that Alexander gave.
Et donc ça m'a permis d'utiliser la fumée pour faire une sorte de délayage, entre guillemets, hein, pour faire référence aussi aux aquarelles que nous avait donné Alexandre.
And we really, if you really can see it, you can see how the colors really bleed. There's like a green blur, and a skin tone blur, and there's white.
Donc on voit qu'il y a une forme de... Les couleurs vont un peu déteindre, entre guillemets. Hein. On va avoir du flou, du blur, qui soit vert, qui soit couleur de peau, qui soit blanc.
So that's really kind of going for like a duotone kind of look to it. And letting the image itself manipulate the colors, so the green in the bottom left, for example.
Et donc ça permettait aussi hein, de laisser les couleurs se manipuler elles-mêmes, entre guillemets, hein, comme le vert qu'on voyait en bas à gauche.
And something certainly all three of us were very interested in, and that's just having colors change across a scene. So certainly in terms of lighting, there's a continuity and the shots match within themselves. But you'll notice that from the start to the end of the shot, it will actually change its color. And that's something that's very interesting because you don't notice it. It's just amazing how much you can change the color of a shot as a dynamic.
Et ce qui nous intéresse aussi de faire, hein, c'est de changer les couleurs au fur et à mesure de la scène. C'est-à-dire qu'il va y avoir une continuité au niveau de l'éclairage, par exemple, mais en fait, on va s'apercevoir, et c'est vraiment étonnant de voir à quel point on peut le faire, que les couleurs vont véritablement se modifier tout au long de la scène.
D'ailleurs, Bruno nous a dit que c'était ce vers quoi il avait envie d'aller le plus en plus. C'est-à-dire le mouvement de lumière, le changement à l'intérieur du plan.
Yes, it's a very powerful thing to do, and it's actually extraordinary that how subtle or truly subliminal it can be. Because if you look at this shot, it's actually quite intense in terms of the saturation. And then, you know, we've got very intense fires, but now you can see it's actually dissolving through to another color.
et c'est quelque chose de très puissant en fait, hein, et ça se passe de façon très subtile, très subliminale sur le plan qu'on vient de voir. Par exemple, c'est un plan qui est extrêmement saturé, mais on va avoir un feu par exemple qui va être intense, mais qui va se dissoudre et se fondre dans une autre couleur.
And one of the things that because these films do not have an enormous budget, we try to avoid kind of rotoscoping or anything too manual. So I'm always trying to work out ways of letting the image kind of generate its own aesthetic.
Et comme on n'avait pas un budget énorme, on a essayé d'éviter la rotoscopie, par exemple, des choses manuelles comme ça. Et ça me paraît toujours intéressant, hein, que l'image puisse générer sa propre esthétique elle-même.
And so that, for example, would mean, donc par exemple, le changement de lumière changera l'étalonnage, c'est-à-dire l'image elle-même crée son propre étalonnage.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing I personally tend to dislike is overgrading a sequence where it's just too graded and it really takes the life out of a shot.
Juste un mot avant que tu passes à l'autre film. Moi aussi, je pense que Faust, c'est un chef-d'œuvre.
C'est clair, oui.
On pourrait faire 3 heures rien que sur ce film-là. Juste pour rappeler des choses, il a été tourné en 2011, je crois. Harry Potter, en tout cas le Harry Potter sur lequel a travaillé Bruno en 2009. Ils ont bénéficié de ce travail qu'ils ont fait avant, comme tu l'as dit, avec Harry Potter. Mais je crois que le budget du film, si mes souvenirs sont bons, est de 5 millions de dollars sur ce film. Combien de temps il a travaillé, Peter, sur ce film?
Well, the journey for Faust was quite interesting because the budget was quite limited. We really worked with Bruno and the team to work out the best way to do it. So it was actually graded in Helsinki, but then I got the final grade and did like a day or two back at Technicolor in London to do then our final record outs. So it was really just 2 weeks. I mean, frankly, from a pragmatic viewpoint, you've got to be quick.
Je rappelle juste que le film a été tourné en 35 mm.
Et ce qui est étonnant, je pense, c'est de voir ces deux films côte à côte dans l'œuvre de Bruno et la tienne, et de voir les mêmes motifs, le blur par exemple que vous avez développé sur Harry Potter, et de le retrouver transformé dans Faust.
Yeah, I mean, we'd like to think it's what's appropriate for the particular film at the time, and certainly a director such as Alexander Sokolov is fearless, and you're not necessarily making a film as such. It is some other kind of visual poem.
Et comme disait Caroline, Bruno nous a beaucoup parlé de la lumière et du temps. Et aussi, et par ça, je pense qu'il entend le temps subjectif du spectateur. Et dans le prochain extrait que nous allons montrer, il y a un moment comme ça où le temps s'arrête. Vas-y Stéphane, le son.
Kommen Sie rein. Hier. Da. Kommen Sie rein. Kommen Sie rein. Nehmen Sie Platz. Kommen Sie rein. Bitte. Setzen Sie sich. Setzen Sie sich. Ich habe das Bett verschoben zum Fenster wegen des Lichts.
Ich muss Sie was fragen.
Ja, bitte.
Was Seltsames.
Sie können alles fragen.
Verzeihen Sie.
Fragen Sie schon.
Und was ist das hier?
Ein Blasebalg.
Ja.
Ja.
Und das hier?
Das ist eine Retorte für die Rektifikation von Quecksilber. Ist das alles, was Sie fragen wollten?
Man sagt. Nein, wissen Sie?
Was?
I think a note there is to show how fearless Bruno can be, because Alexander arrived and really pulled out from his bag a bunch of lenses that his friends had from the Russian army. And we're shooting film here. And that's an example of taking on what Bruno and the lighting was doing with the different interactive, but then just adding to that and dropping on our own dissolves and wipes. So as our actress is near the door, all that brightening is done in the grade, but just doing it all dynamic. But kind of doing it on the cuts, so it still feels. I mean, what was fast. I used a phrase before, and this is what I mean about grading for the cut or grading for the lighting. And this is an example where you're actually grading for the cut, which is great fun. And that scene in particular is a good example of what I mean about not over-grading a sequence, because it would be a very different sequence if I sat down and just did the perfect grade and matched every shot to in itself. You know, I would have killed the very concept of time, but by letting each time we cut back to, say, our main actor, that there's different lighting and it's all changing. You know, if I actually had taken that out, I would have killed the sequence.
Donc pour revenir au rush, vous avez eu la générosité de nous montrer les rushs impeccablement, je dirais, stables de Bruno sur Inside Lewin Davis. Est-ce que les rushs étaient aussi stables sur Faust?
Well, I guess there's a couple of things. The production in general was blessed that it was New York winter, and like Paris can be, this cloud cover just comes in and it just sits there for days. So it's like the perfect scrim. And a kind of anecdote is this was one of the last films to go through the Technicolor New York lab. So everybody kind of felt that it was a bit of a swan song in some ways. And technically all the rushes were transferred in real time on a 4K scanner. And I'd worked with Bruno, and we'd agreed once Bruno had worked out kind of his lighting ratios and where we would need to be, I would just make the calls each morning if he was starting to slip up or down in terms of exposure for the negative. And these were also, I graded the rushes myself, so these are also fully graded rushes, as in we would sit down and we would grade them as if they are the DI. Because this film had a reasonably limited budget, the idea was that if we did fully graded rushes, we could then just conform up, reuse those grades, and then that would become the final film. And now that I remember, I had to get back to London to in fact finish Bruno's Dark Shadows. So we had pulled on a second colorist, Martin. What we'd set up is Bruno would shoot, it would go to the lab, and the grade, if you will, would be applied, but the colorist would hit a button which would then send me to London from New York, a reference frame. I would then get it up on my box. I could then find the grade, set the printer light, and then send it back, and then that would be applied for the rushes, because I kind of know where Bruno would think in terms of his rushes. So that's one reason why it was so consistent. We had that very controlled full color system. Faust was much more limited budget, so that was really just like one light rushes, and Alexander was comfortable with that, knowing that we would just completely rebuild something.
Le truc qui me frappe avec Llewellyn Davis, en effet, c'est cette maîtrise du contraste et en fait cette limitation du contraste pour créer cet univers de requiem, de tristesse.
Yeah, it just sometimes everything comes together, and certainly Llewellyn Davis, I think, worked very well in terms of they just had the right weather, maybe not as much snow as they'd wanted, but it was also down to the testing at the beginning of the shoot where we were able to control or revise what kind of colours art department would have on set. So as an anecdote, the latest film that Bruno shot for Joe Wright in New York, without giving too much away, it's set in a house, and a lot of it is set at night. And there was a discussion that the art direction for the walls was to have quite a dark colour walls. And the question is, how dark should that be before the camera will read that as like, you know, black? Or how bright should it be before it all starts to look a bit weird? So the team did a test shoot with about 3 variations of darker treated wall colours. And then Bruno just held the exposure the way ideally he would want it to be. And then we got that up. Based on that, this was marked a big moment in our life, because the lookup table that we'd been using, which was like a film print style where the blacks or the shadow was quite heavy, was taking the colours down too fast. So based on that, we moved away from this LUT, and we actually moved on to an ASUS RRT, which has helped, or it's reproducing exactly how we want, and it's meant that the lighting package could be under control, and it means that art department are happy because they're actually seeing the walls the way they want it to be, and it also means that you know, the editor is okay because we're not seeing like these incredibly dark rushes. So that's an example of being involved at the beginning, because it can just, well, frankly, there's kind of no reason not to. So with a sequence like this,
Stéphane, tu peux baisser un tout petit peu plus l'audio? Merci.
Johnny Depp had his own makeup artist sit in with me to adjust the skin tone.
Sur une séquence comme ça, Johnny Depp en fait avait un maquilleur qui était à côté de moi en fait, hein, pour pouvoir faire des ajustements au niveau des teintes des couleurs de peau.
And for Tim, it was all about the blue of the dress.
Tout ce qui intéressait Tim, c'était le bleu de la robe.
Donc là, il y a un mélange de studio et de vraies vagues, n'est-ce pas?
Yeah, so studio waves with a whole water tank. Visual effects went and shot all the waves, in fact, with a digital camera. So we were intermixing 35 for the principal photography, and then second unit with some digital camera, which was actually before the Alexa, in fact. Yep. So with Johnny, obviously we have to maintain blood. So just technically, you can't just like rotoscope and suck all the color out of it, because the blood will disappear as well. It's a studio picture, and there is such a thing called MPAA blood. So in terms of basically for censorship for the US, you have to be aware that the red of the blood needs to be quite dark. If the red is too red, you run the risk of like an R rating or something.
Ce qui est intéressant quand on voit ces images, c'est peut-être nous, on a tout de suite des références, et entre autres Gaspard David Friedrich. C'était quoi vos références d'images? Alors, Tim Burton a les siennes, évidemment, parce qu'il produit beaucoup d'images. Mais quelles étaient vos références à Bruno et vous, quand vous travailliez sur ces images?
I proposed, again, very analytical, that Dark Shadows was a TV series from America in the 70s. So just as a philosophy, I thought it would be interesting to reference new American films from the 70s. And at the time, their lenses would flare like hell, and they were very colored flares, and they were also just strangely directional. I mean, basically, the imagery technically was not very good. If we think of like a typical cop, like a TV American cop show, and the flashing lights, how you always get these like amazing blue blurs and all sorts of things. And of course, Eva being Eva in a Tim Burton film, it almost goes, it's just assumed that she's going to have that kind of skin tone. Because and certainly the philosophy from Bruno is, you know, these are vampires, but it's daytime, so it's always playing with light. And for example, in this scene coming up, there's a bit of a gag with the lipstick. So this is what I talk about, the dynamics. We'll notice that Eva's lipstick is quite extreme, and it'll make sense why in a second. And then in terms of dynamics, if we watch this, hopefully you can't see it, but it is actually getting progressively darker. So for reasons that will also become apparent, probably in about another 10 shots, I think. And it's a subtle thing, but in terms of the red, if we look at the curtains and the lamps, it's actually quite subdued, so that gives us space for the red of the lips to actually be more intense.
Bruno nous disait que l'enjeu de ce film, c'était comment être saturé dans les couleurs primaires, rouge, vert, bleu, et que tout le reste soit très désaturé. Donc, il avait fallu que vous inventiez des outils pour aller vers ça, justement.
Yeah, and then technically that's using those kind of controls that I showed earlier, where you can control the amount of colors within the colors. So this is why we made it darker, so that we could get as bright as we could here without it clipping out, because we really wanted to keep the texture in the smoke. And again, for that film, we ran with the idea of fully graded rushes. For a director like Tim Burton, Tim needs his kind of references, otherwise he gets very kind of lost. So the rushes that he was cutting with really did need to look how Bruno or how the final film should look. So we did a full DI each morning on the rushes.
Et est-ce que tu peux nous dire un peu plus ton travail, ce que Céline évoquait tout à l'heure, c'est-à-dire de la séparation du rouge, du vert et du bleu, et d'isoler certaines teintes de rouge, vert, bleu et d'en éliminer d'autres.
Yeah. If you shoot with a digital camera, there tends to be a lot of mixing of the colors within each other. So the red will actually have quite a lot of green and blue, and the green will have quite a lot of red and blue. Film or film negative tends to filter that and it will give the impression of having purer colours, specifically red. So if you think of a red soldier's jacket, if it's shot on film, it will look quite a deep red. It will look quite burgundy, whereas with digital, it will tend to get a little brighter. And it's that kind of purifying of the colour, or really, that I think is in fact pretty much the new wave. I think over the next 5 years, we're going to see radical changes in the kind of controls we have with colour grading, and this matrixing concept is a huge deal.
Donc pas seulement l'étalonnage, c'est aussi la capacité de séparation de couleurs des cibles.
In a funny way, it's kind of like whatever it takes. For example, with film, the red, green, and blue, or the CYMs, don't track exactly the same. So if you lift up the shadows, they will tend to be that kind of, as I'm sure you're all aware, that kind of quite bluish look to the blacks, that they're never really pure black. Well, there's a control, a little equation that you can use, which is it really is as simple as if green is greater than red or blue, keep it the same, or if blue is the same. So put it another way, you're probably used to green screen or blue screen where you can suppress the color, the green, but it leaves like the spill where it is. It's using the same kind of concept, so it means that's why in a film like that, the blacks are incredibly clean, because we're really running a blue suppression just on the blacks. I think something that really shows why it's important for a DP to know what they're lighting for. If you remember the smoke in the window, that was really just through the normal grade as per the rest of the sequence, because Bruno lit it that way, knowing what the contrast ratio would be. So that meant that if it was not done correctly, and I would have to go in and pull down all the highlights, I would then also pull down, say, Eva's face, so that, and then it would start to lose its kind of consistency. And that's the thing about really agreeing on the lookup table and your general kind of contrast of the grade that you have, and ideally being able to hold that contrast ratio when it's being lit, which I think helps contribute enormously to the kind of consistency of the look.
Je propose qu'on regarde un dernier clip auquel Bruno tenait beaucoup, qui est donc un cassage de gueule dans une allée. Et en parlant de ce clip, Bruno disait que sur le tournage, il avait convaincu les frères Cohen de cacher le visage de la personne qui attaque le héros, Llewyn Davis. Et il disait qu'en cachant ce visage, en le mettant dans le noir, en fait, il ralentissait un peu le temps subjectif du spectateur, parce que le spectateur n'arrêtait pas de se poser, mais qui est cette personne, etc.
You're a funny boy, huh? What? Hats up in your big mouth, huh, funny boy? What? That's what I do for a living. Who are you? What you do? What you do?
Sorry. What?
Oh! You sit there in the audience last night yelling your crowd.
Oh, for Christ's sake, you yell stuff, man. It's a show.
It wasn't your show. at the opera, jackass. It's a fucking basket. Believe in this fucking cesspool. You can have it. What you do.
Et donc oui, Bruno disait que le storyboard original, parce que les Cohen travaillent beaucoup avec des storyboards, on voyait le visage de ce monsieur très tôt dans la séquence, et que pour lui, le fait de le cacher changeait le temps, notre appréciation de le temps subjectif de cette séquence.
Yep. Kind of makes sense to really keep that in silhouette and to reveal the character. And that also shows an understanding of lighting, because there's black, but there's texture in there, and the reveal of when our main protagonist comes into the light is quite natural. And that's an example of really defining what is the display medium going to be, and then building a grade to then fit within that. Because blacks on a DCI Xenon projector will be quite different to a film print. And this was at the time when it was both a film print and a digital release. So it was premiered at Cannes on digital, but exists as a film print for North America. So that was really making sure that the blacks tracked in the right way, tying in with what Bruno and the Coens are trying to do.
Alors oui, je me demandais, vous en parlez tout à l'heure, de quelle est l'influence entre le contraste et la taille de l'écran pour la projection.
There's not really an equation as such, but it's all about flare, because you know, the bigger the lens and the bigger the screen, the more light you have to put through, so the blacks will lift up, and the flare on the lens itself will move around. And then depending on the screen, if it's a high gain screen or even slightly curved, the screen itself will start to fill in its own blacks.
J'ai une question par rapport à l'image qu'on a vue de Llewyn Davis, où il y avait le plan large où Oscar Isaac est assis, et derrière on voit le mur qui reçoit la lumière de la fenêtre. Et puis dans le plan rapproché, vous avez indiqué que vous ou Monsieur Delbonnel que le mur était devenu un peu plus foncé. Donc soit il a mis un drapeau sur le tournage. Et je voulais juste savoir, dans sa façon de travailler, c'est quoi le pourcentage qui est fait sur le plateau, vu que c'est quelqu'un qui, quand même, dès ses premiers films qui ont marqué les gens, il compte souvent sur le DI. Donc il va jusqu'où où ce genre de détail est fait en DI pour le temps du plateau.
Yes, but certainly Bruno will still turn in a very consistent neg or file these days, so that we can then grade it where we want it to be. And there's a lot of things about lighting for the cut that Bruno will do, and one of which is always basically lighting for the actors. So if you're going to be going in for an MCU, you know, you try to drop the background down a little bit, particularly if it's a completely full white wall, which in that case it was like a cream marble. So that's really just like lighting decisions, you know, going from wides to close-ups.
Oui, ce que nous disait Bruno, c'est que vous faisiez aussi justement très très peu de patates et que c'était beaucoup plus un travail sur les courbes et sur la couleur que... enfin voilà, c'est l'exemple type où effectivement je pense que c'est beaucoup plus de la lumière, donc de l'impression on va dire, que de l'étalonnage.
I mean, the printer point style grading is one kind of thing, but certainly we'll use curves. So it's very much like the zone system, like Ansel Adams. So you know we'll get in and change the shape of the bottom end and the shape of the top end. So yeah, we do a lot of work like that, and particularly with colors, where we'll work with we'll work in different color spaces with the curves.
En fait, est-ce qu'il y a des moments où des exemples en fait que les talonneurs est en désaccord avec le chef opérateur pour certains en fait images créées?
Yes, and that's really just a creative partnership and how you manage that. I mean, formally, I suppose that the relationship is something like I answer to the DP and the DP answers to the director, and then we collectively present the work. But then it's obviously down to the individual cases. I wouldn't say the disagree is a very strong word. Sometimes I will advise that technically we might be doing something that's going to get us into trouble in terms of creative. If I'm finding I'm disagreeing, I will try to work out what it is that people are trying to do. So then I'm not disagreeing, but then that's just part of the relationship to be able to work with somebody.
Pour finir avec Bruno, parce que c'est quand même lui qui est le grand absent de cette soirée, quand on rencontre Bruno ensemble, il nous parle de La Notée d'Antonioni, il nous parle des films Tarkovsky qui l'ont marqué, il nous parle de sa visite au musée de Munch, il nous parle de la découverte d'un peintre américain qui s'appelle Dick
Dippenkorn.
Voilà, qui est un adepte de Matisse. Il nous parle de son amour pour Soulages, dont il rappelle qu'il fabrique ses pinceaux. Il nous parle de Richter. Il nous parle de l'ouverture de 8,5 de Fellini. Et puis, pour reprendre ces mots que j'ai notés, il nous dit, je cite Bruno, Boulez a écrit un livre sur Paul Klee, Le pays fertile, en partant du principe que quand il parle avec des musiciens, il parle entre techniciens. Est-ce que la peinture peut parler de musique? Est-ce que la musique peut parler de cinéma? Est-ce que la lumière peut être un élément créateur de rythme au sein d'une même séquence? Le cinéma, c'est la musique, c'est aussi de l'abstraction. Le cinéma, ce n'est pas uniquement de la narration.